Single dad's hair transformation revealed an inspiring family secret when his Mafia dad walked. Justin's hands trembled slightly as he sat in the salon chair, staring at his reflection. The bubble of excitement bubbling in Mia's voice felt foreign compared to the unsettling void that loomed over him. The buzz of clippers filled the air, an almost therapeutic sound drowning out the chaotic fears swirling in his mind. Today he would shed the weight of his past, or so he hoped. 15 years had passed since his father disappeared, leaving a stain on their family that Justin couldn't wash off. The notoriety that came with being linked to a Mafia legend was a ghost that haunted him daily. He was just a mechanic, for crying out loud, labored hands turning wrenches to earn a living, but the bloodline kept dragging him back. What if one day, a thought so close to his heart it made his stomach churn, they might find him, wanting to drag him back into that life he had fought to escape? As the stylist worked her magic, Justin's mind raced. Would Mia truly understand the legacy he was trying to outrun, or would she see him as merely a coward hiding from the shadows of his father? Each snip of hair fell like the weight of his father's crimes. Righteousness swirled in contradiction to fear. He loved his daughter more than anything. Her laughter was the light of his dark days, yet her innocence made his secret feel like a betrayal. Before we continue, the stylist motioned, interrupting his spiral, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. He forced a smile, the moment barely registering in the swirling eddy of his thoughts. The buzz cut was just the external transformation, a diversion from the whirlwind that was his internal life. A life now intertwined with Mia, whose spirited nature and fearlessness often jolted him from his morose reflection. Later, sorting through boxes in the attic, his fingers grazed yellowed letters and worn photographs of yesterday's life, one that Justin couldn't completely recognize as his own. The letters whispered family secrets, unspeakable betrayals wrapped in twisted loyalty. Each revelation clawed at his heart, igniting rage mixed with a dizzying sense of empathy. His father had made decisions rooted in survival, yet that survival came at the cost of trust and moral compromise. Hands still shaking, he shoved the letters aside, realizing his friend Matt was being targeted by the very people who had corrupted his family's legacy.
Matt had always shielded Justin from that world, yet here they were, the shadow creeping again, pulling him back into that life he abhorred. What if he chose to protect him? Would he not only risk Matt's life, but also unearth all that awful past? He could hear Mia's voice, bright and unyielding, urging him to stand tall through the storm. Yet the very idea of confronting the shadows that flickered in the dark was suffocating. The moral abyss weighed heavy, consistently pulling him down. Loyalty to Matt, or a cautionary retreat from his father's sins? Every instinct screamed for action, yet uncertainty snuffed out the fire, leaving him facing the dim reality of his choices. With the skyline beyond his window darkening, Justin's breath caught. He blinked, locking eyes on the letters once more, desperately clinging to the last thread of control. The storm wasn't just on the horizon, it was at his doorstep, and the legacy he sought to defy began to close in. One immutable truth stood starkly in his mind. He had to make a choice soon. To honor a bloodline rooted in fear, or to forge a path driven by justice. The night offered no answers, only gnawing anxiety, as Justin dared to confront the weight of legacy and the looming darkness that demanded to be faced.
He was no longer the frightened boy seeking validation. He was a father, a protector, a man capable of shaping his own destiny. With newfound determination, he picked up his phone and texted Matt. Hey, we need to talk. Urgent. He hit send before second-guessing himself. This was the first step towards a conversation that needed to happen, a declaration of intent to reclaim that balance of power. Later that evening, over a small table in their usual diner, the ambiance buzzed with community laughter. Yet for Justin, the din sounded like a distant echo as he continuously scanned the entrance, anxiety knotting in his stomach. He was waiting for Matt, but he was also waiting to see if his past would come back to haunt him tonight. He needed to get through this conversation without faltering, as his resolve stiffened at the mere thought of risking everything. When Matt arrived, he carried the air of someone oblivious to the weight pressing down on Justin. They exchanged pleasantries, yet Justin could sense an undercurrent in their interaction. "Dude, what's up?" Matt grinned, but Justin noticed the slight twitch in his friend's smile. "Matt, it's serious." Justin leaned forward, dropping his voice to just above a whisper. "I know you're being targeted. I want to help, but we need to rethink your ties." For a long moment, Matt just stared, the light in his eyes dimming as understanding sank in. "What are you suggesting?" "Mia needs you safe, and I can't risk those people coming after us. We might need to lay low, create a buffer." The words poured out as if Justin were discovering them along the way. He was shocked at his own assertiveness, betraying the instinct to protect himself first, yet yearning to shield Matt from a life he couldn't embrace. Matt's expression shifted from puzzlement to concern. "You're serious about this?" "More than I've ever been." Each word spoke volumes about the internal battle Justin had faced. The diner hummed around them, an idyllic setting overshadowed by the gravity of their discussion. Justin was precipitously aware of how the past threatened to creep back into his life, and how each decision he was making would ripple through his future and Mia's. As they continued to converse, a creeping anxiety simmered beneath the surface, an undeniable awareness that while they might be planning to act in the moment, the storm was already at their doorstep. Justin sensed it even before the door creaked open, pushing in a gust of cold air. When a figure dressed in dark leather stepped through, the hairs on the back of his neck prickled. He recognized that threatening presence. It was all too familiar, and it immediately sliced through the air of camaraderie they had briefly fostered. A chilling truth dawned upon him. The legacy he was terrified of confronting may not only live within him, but could now threaten everything he held dear.
As he locked eyes with the newcomer, Justin understood that no matter how meticulously he crafts his choices, survival instincts burned deep. It was time not just to talk, but to take decisive action against the shadows that loomed ever closer. The moment of truth had arrived, and Justin was no longer willing to wait. The moment Justin's gaze met the entrance's shadowy figure, his heart raced. Suddenly, the cozy diner felt like an echo chamber, amplifying his mounting dread. The newcomer stood tall, exuding an air that was both commanding and intrusive, just like the memories he fought desperately to escape. Justin's mind spiraled through a flurry of thoughts, his focus narrowing on Matt, who remained blissfully unaware of the impending storm. "What do we do?" Justin's voice was barely a whisper, the weight of his uncertainty filtering through the urgency of the moment. Matt cocked his head, confusion mixing with concern. "You know this guy? Remember the stories? The whispers of my father's dealings? He was part of that world," Justin stammered, gripping the table. He felt a surge of both shame for his lineage and an invigorating determination to protect what mattered. "Justin, relax. He's just standing there," Matt replied, trying to anchor Justin back to the immediate reality. But it was too late. The past had breached the present. Justin's thoughts raced ahead, envisioning potential scenarios, weighing options against the hoary teachings of his childhood, a life which had prioritized survival over authentic connection. The thrill of breaking free now stood in stark contrast to the instinct that urged him to flee. "Keep calm," he managed, more to himself than anyone else. He scanned the surroundings, noting the careful glances from nearby patrons who, oblivious to the impending threat, continued their meals with ceaseless chatter. "We can't let him disrupt our lives." As if sensing Justin's resolve, the stranger began to walk toward their table with an unhurried confidence, his eyes cold and unyielding. Justin saw Matt shift uneasily, sensing the danger lurking like a serpent ready to strike. The two friends locked eyes briefly, an unspoken language passing between them, a shared understanding of the stakes involved. "Do you want to leave?" Matt asked, his voice a blend of concern and defiance. "No, stay put," Justin commanded, swallowing hard. "I need to confront this." Before he could add more, the man halted before their table, his lips curving into a predatory smile. "Well, well, if it isn't the prodigal son." His voice dripped with condescension, each word a reminder of the legacy Justin sought to dismantle. "Get lost," Justin said coldly. His heart thudded in his chest, yet a new courage surged within him, a mixture of parental protectiveness and latent strength whispered into being by his own upheaval. "Now that's no way to greet family." The figure leaned closer, invading Justin's space. "I'm here for your father."
"My father's no longer part of my life," Justin shot back,
trying to find footholds in the emotional turmoil that threatened to rock him back to his old self. And that's a conversation you won't have here. The man chuckled dryly, leaning back slightly. You say that now, but those blood ties are hard to break. You may have cut your hair, but they don't erase the past. Justin felt the declaration cut deep, but a stronger impulse ignited within him. He wasn't that frightened boy anymore. This confrontation was not just about him, it was about Mia, about laying down the blueprint for the life he intended to create. I'm not afraid of you. Fear isn't what I'm after, the stranger replied, his expression unfurling into mock sympathy. I'm here to remind you how inevitable it is, Justin. You think you can hide from us? You can't protect your friend or your daughter from who you are. That accusation snaked through Justin's resolve, piercing deeper than he expected. Images of his past flickered in his mind like shadows, nights spent terrified, uncertain, and unmoored. Yet, just as quickly as the echoes haunted him, he pushed them aside. I'm building something new here. You can't tear us apart. Ah, bravado, a lovely facade, the figure retorted, a trace of menace flickering behind his eyes. Let's see if it holds up when you start losing what you care about. A cacophony of emotions erupted within Justin, fear, anger, defiance, intertwining in a maelstrom that left him breathless. He had to act, to reclaim that potency he knew lay dormant amidst the turmoil. Before he could formulate a response, he felt a tightening grip on his arm, the familiar presence of Matt anchoring him, symbolizing everything Justin had fought for. Enough of this. We'll deal with whatever comes, together. In that moment, a new layer of determination burned inside Justin, wrapping the fear in clarity of purpose. He couldn't let the shadows control him any longer. No more would he succumb to legacy. With Matt's steady presence fueling him forward, he prepared to make a stand shaped not by intimidation, but affirmation. As he faced the intruder one more time, Justin realized he wasn't only fighting against a man, but against an inheritance of violence. The sound of laughter echoed a reminder of normalcy just beyond his reach, but it no longer deterred him. You'll hear from me. His voice was steady, a firm declaration. With that, the figure stepped back, assessing his opponent with a glint of admiration and a simmering threat. Just as the tension waned, Justin felt the intensity shift again. The storm was not just coming, it was already here. Would he have the strength to protect Mia and Matt when it finally broke loose? As he stood up, he saw the lingering menace in the man's eyes, a promise that the battle was far from over, an ominous task awaiting him, rooted in his history, yet forking into an unknown future.
With his heart pounding and his thoughts racing, Justin knew that the fight for his freedom had only just begun. It was time to plan, to act, and to prepare for the unrelenting challenges that were sure to follow. The clatter of cutlery fell into a hurried silence as Justin and Matt exchanged a charged glance, the confrontation taking a lingering toll on both their nerves. The intoxicating mix of fear and resolve coursed through Justin, sharpening his focus like a razor. He stepped away from the table, urging Matt to remain seated. Every instinct screamed caution, yet he found a strange thrill in standing up, a palpable defiance in the air, the first tangible step toward reclaiming his life. Justin's mind raced as he exited the diner into the crisp late afternoon air, his heart pounding with every step. He took a deep breath, the coolness biting at his face, grounding him momentarily. A frantic energy thrummed within, the reassurance of his decision only intensified as clarity washed over him. No longer was he the helpless boy ducking and weaving through familial chaos, but rather a man standing at a crossroads, poised to determine his own fate. Yet the shadow of his father's legacy loomed large over him, the past whispering insidiously in his ear. How could he protect Mia when lurking threats remained at the fringes, ready to claw back into his life? The enormity of the moment weighed heavily on his chest, squeezing breaths until they turned shallow. He reached for his phone, longing to speak to Mia, to hear her laughter, to anchor himself against the rising tide of anxiety. "Hey, what's up?" Matt's voice broke through his thoughts as he slipped out behind him, concern flashing in his eyes. "Let's walk," Justin replied, his voice steadier than he felt. They moved along the sidewalk, the street bustling yet seeming distant from their shared turmoil. "Do you think he'll come after you?" Matt asked, detention in his shoulders tight as they turned a corner. "Not if I can help it," Justin replied, a flicker of determination igniting. "It's time to face this head on. I need to know where I stand, not just for me, but for Mia." The mention of his daughter filled him with purpose. Matt nodded, a supportive presence that reminded Justin of what he wanted to protect. "All right, but how do we do that? You can't just ignore the past, Justin." "No, I can't,"
Justin admitted, each step a deliberate anchor against unsettling memories. But I can confront it. I need to gather information, piece together who that man is, what he wants from me. Maybe it starts with looking into my father's dealings, talking to people who know. As he spoke, a heavier weight settled onto his shoulders. Conflict loomed ahead, an inevitable reckoning with his history, but he felt a burgeoning strength knotting itself in his core. It was a plan forming, laced with nerves, yet emboldened by a newfound resolve. Matt spoke up, breaking Justin's train of thought.
And if you find something dangerous? I can't run anymore. I can't let fear dictate my life, Justin said firmly, as if the act of declaring it out loud fortified his resolve. His gaze landed on a nearby park, where children laughed and played under the watchful eyes of their parents. For a moment, the innocence of their joy was a bitter reminder of what was at stake. Are you ready to let this unfold? Matt prodded, clearly picking up on the intensity brewing inside of Justin. Yes, I need to take control. Justin clenched his fists, envisioning each move in a chess game only he could play. Aggressive and careful, he was flooring the gas pedal while monitoring the rear view. He'd be damned if history dictated his course. As they paused momentarily beside an oak tree, Justin felt a sense of urgency rise within him, propelling him to act. Let's meet up with some of my father's former colleagues. I need to understand them, their loyalty, perhaps unravel these connections. Knowledge is power. Okay, but it won't be easy, Matt cautioned, but there was a glimmer of support in his eyes. And we'll need a solid plan moving forward. Yeah, Justin agreed, his mind racing with possibilities and risk assessments, akin to drawing blueprints in real time. We'll need to keep Mia safeguarded. She doesn't deserve this, and neither do we. As the gravity of their discussion deepened, Justin felt the winds of change blow with renewed hope. He had to go into this battle with eyes open, despite the stakes. Whatever deliverance came, he had reaffirmed one truth above all else. This was about reshaping his legacy, one informed decision at a time. And as they walked on, flanked by the sounds of laughter and the sunset casting long shadows, Justin couldn't shake the feeling that the confrontation was only the opening act, a prelude to something far larger. What would come next would require all his courage, intellect, and perhaps a tether of alliances to fend off the spiraling tempest. Tonight was only the beginning. The next step awaited, brimming with potential dangers and discoveries. Would he be ready when the truth finally unveiled a sinister twist? The next morning dawned with a sense of urgency slicing through Justin's resolve. He had spent hours on his couch, mind racing, scribbling down names and addresses associated with his father's murky past. The weight of his mission pressed hard against his chest. Now was the time to dissect where the image of his father as a criminal overlord ended and the reality began. Mia's giggle echoed through the apartment as she played with her toys, a stark contrast to the chaos brewing within him. He peeked into her room, the innocence of her spirit a bitter reminder of what he stood to lose if he faltered. In that moment, he recognized the duality of his existence, a father vowing to shield his daughter from darkness while stepping into it himself.
"Hey, kiddo," he called softly, his voice refusing to betray his inner turmoil. "Are we going to the park later?" she chirped, eyes sparkling with excitement. "Absolutely," Justin replied, masking his own apprehension behind a smile. He couldn't afford to dampen her joy with his worries, but he felt like a tightrope walker inching along a precarious line. After a lackluster breakfast filled with distracted nods and short responses, the time came for him to move into action. Justin grabbed his jacket and headed out, the ache of his impending task gnawing at him. While the sun lit the streets with a warmth that belied his chill, he found himself driving toward the first name on his list, a former associate of his father's named Louis. Known in shady circles as a whisperer between families, he had connections that both repulsed and intrigued Justin. He parked outside a dilapidated warehouse, the kind of place where secrets seeped through rusted cracks. The sound of his own heartbeat reverberated in his ears as he approached the entrance, the air thick with uncertainty. Why had he been drawn into this life? The gravity of his legacy was both a burden and a catalyst, one he felt like he had spent his whole life avoiding. Just as he prepared to knock, a voice drew him back. "You sure you want to do this?" Matt's text popped up on his screen. Justin hesitated, weighing the risk against the potential for revelation. "Yeah," he typed back. "It's time to learn the truth." He pushed through the door, the pungent air reflecting years of neglect. Inside, the dim lighting clung to the walls, barely illuminating the faces gathered around a table strewn with paperwork and empty bottles. Louis looked up, his expression a mix of surprise and mischief. Thought you'd steer clear of this life, Justin. What brings you back? I want answers, Justin found himself saying, the firmness of his voice surprising even him. Answers, huh? Louis leaned back, folding his arms, a smirk creeping onto his face. You stepping into your father's shoes, then? No, Justin spat, anger blooming at the insinuation. This isn't about me. It's about Mia. She deserves to know her grandfather was more than a shadow. The sincerity in his words seemed to momentarily stun the room into silence. Louis regarded him with a more serious demeanor and motioned for Justin to sit. The sharp contrast of their past personas was palpable. The boy who once cowered in shame before his father's reputation was now a man determined to reclaim a narrative without fear. With each exchanged word, Justin felt pieces of his identity fall into place, shaping understanding out of ignorance. Each detail about his father's dealings blurred dark lines into shades of gray. Perhaps the monster he envisioned wasn't the complete story.
However, every answer offered a new question, a deeper entanglement of emotions and revelations that instilled both dread and anticipation. Just as Justin felt hope rising, Louis leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial tone. But you know, some truths come with a price, kid. The chill in his words sent a shiver through Justin's spine. It was a reminder that with each step forward, there lay a labyrinth of sinister ties and moral choices that would test not just his resolve, but his identity as a father. Are you willing to pay it? Louis pressed, eyes shining with a predatory eagerness. What choices lay ahead? Justin realized he had merely scratched the surface of a deeper darkness. It was time to confront the unsettling truth. How far would he go to protect Mia, and at what cost could secrets be unveiled? As he stared into the abyss of the uncertain, he felt the familiar tempest swirl once more, daring him to step fully into the storm. He knew the next chapter of his life was beginning, and it was rapidly transforming into something far more perilous than he had anticipated. What awaited him was a maelstrom of choices, consequences, and the ultimate confrontation with his father's legacy. And perhaps the hardest battle would be against the shadows of his own making. Would he emerge from this ordeal with his family intact, or would the other end of truth beckon with irreparable destruction? The stakes were rising, and the end of one legacy was precariously balanced against the birth of another, forcing him to confront the man he'd become. Which path would he choose? The atmosphere in the dimly lit warehouse shifted palpably as Justin settled onto the rickety chair across from Louis. Every instinct screamed at him to retreat, to escape the web that he was willingly stepping into, but determination pulsed through his veins. What price? He challenged, each syllable laden with resolve. Louis' smirk faded, replaced by a calculating gaze. Information isn't free, kid. You want the real dirt on your father? It's going to cost you far more than a few dollars. There are favors owed, lines crossed. You ready to get your hands dirty? Justin forced down the unease churning in his gut. If it's about my father, I'll do what it takes. But you haven't answered my question. What are we talking about here? Louis leaned forward, a flicker of excitement crossing his face. There's a shipment coming in this Friday. Drugs, arms, the usual. You help me and I'll give you what you need. Understand? The words hit Justin like a punch. This was not the life he wanted. This was not how he had envisioned standing in his father's shadow. Yet the images of Mia danced in his mind, their bright future, the pull of the past clamoring for acknowledgement. You want me to be my errand boy for a few scraps of information? I'm not a pawn in your game. Louis waved his hand dismissively, a hint of annoyance darkening his expression.
You think you're any better than the rest? You just walked in here, and now you want to play the saint. Blood is thick, kid. Your father's name carries weight, but it's not without its debts. Justin's heart pounded, the implications weighing heavily on him. Did he truly want to ally himself with this world? Each heartbeat urged him forward, not just for the truth of his father, but for the safety and future of Mia. The innocence he sought to protect sat nestled at home, completely unaware of these dark dealings. Seconds ticked by, stretching the tension in the air taut. Justin inhaled sharply, visions of his daughter flickering. This was personal now. What do I need to do? He asked, the decision made despite the turmoil roiling within. Louis leaned back with a satisfied grin, sensing his victory. That's more like it. You get what I need, simple surveillance. You may even learn something useful while you're at it.
The deal sealed, Justin felt a grim sense of acceptance wash over him. Each step deeper into the shady underbelly of his father's legacy carved away at the man he thought he was, reshaping his convictions. A father should protect his daughter, but he now found himself potentially engaging in activities that compromised that very ideal. Exiting the warehouse, he wrestled with a knot of conflicting emotions. The street outside was glaringly bright compared to the shadows within. That contrast pulled at his sense of self. How could he reconcile this venture with the life he wanted to lead for Mia? Driving home, his mind spiraled. He pictured the day's logistic nightmares, the risks involved. The thought itself sparked anxiety's fire. If he slipped even slightly, not only would he betray his principles, but he could also jeopardize everything he had worked for. As thoughts spiraled, he found himself reaching for his phone, fingers trembling over the screen. Matt's name loomed large. What could he say? That he was following in his father's footsteps, but with a different motive? No, this wasn't the time for half-truths. Instead, he typed out one raw message. I need your help. I'm going to get dirty with Louis, but I won't lose myself in this. Promise me you'll have my back. As the message sent, uncertainty ran rampant through him. Each heartbeat echoed the secrets encasing his thoughts, the morality of his actions spiraling away from him. Just how deep was he willing to go for the sake of truth? Arriving home, the warmth of Mia's laughter echoed through the apartment, but it felt distant, as if separated by a chasm of darkness he now had one foot in. In the quiet of the night, with the shadows creeping closer, he pondered one thing amidst the chaos of choices. What would it do to him, and to Mia, if he crossed a line he might never return from? Was he ready to face the terrifying answer to that question, or would his desire for truth tether him to something he could never escape?
Tomorrow's choices loomed like storm clouds on the horizon, and with them arose the mantra that now consumed him. Are you willing to pay the price for the truth, Justin? As uncertainty swirled unpredictably about him, he understood the razor-thin line he was treading, a line that could shatter his very identity. At the break of dawn, Justin found himself staring at his reflection in the bathroom mirror. His eyes, once vibrant with dreams, now bore the weight of uncharted decisions. The morning sun, filtered through the slightly grimy window, painted his face in harsh relief. Each line etched into his brow told a story of struggle, a silent witness to the turmoil spiraling within him. He splashed cold water on his face, hoping to jolt himself into clarity. Was this the man he wanted to be? He could almost hear Mia's laughter from downstairs, light and carefree, oblivious to the shadows swallowing her father whole. The thought tugged at him like a lifeline, broadening his perspective beyond the current quagmire. He had never intended to walk this path. It had been thrust upon him. As he paced the living room, the enormity of his choices melded into a pressing urgency. He rummaged through his memories, recalling times when he'd stood firm in his convictions, moments that bolstered him in the face of adversity. Could that same resolve emerge from the depths of his current dilemma? The image of Louis with that sly smile haunted him. Whether or not he was willing to pay the price was no longer a theoretical question. It was now existential. Driving to the library that morning, Justin's thoughts churned. He had decided that before he sank deeper into this web woven by his father's legacy, he needed to unravel it, to understand the man he had idolized from a distance but never truly knew. Shadows of revelations lingered, waiting for him to expose them, to claim a lineage he hadn't chosen but from which he couldn't escape. As he parked, an odd stillness enveloped him. Inside, the library was a sanctuary, filled with volumes of history, crime, and the often elusive truth. He navigated towards the backstacks, where the dusty tomes seemed forgotten, hiding secrets. Flipping through the pages of old newspapers, articles detailing his father's exploits jumped out at him. The person he sought had been painted as a villain, a monster cloaked in charisma and deceit. Disquiet filled him as he came across a familiar face, a photograph that caught him off guard. It was a younger version of his father sitting at a table surrounded by shady characters. The caption beneath read, "Underworld rising star makes a powerful alliance." Anger surged through Justin's veins. The realization that he was on the brink of becoming part of that world ignited a flicker of resistance in him. "Are you really willing to delve into his darkness, Justin?" he asked himself as he studied the image. His father's smile, once endearing, now felt like a betrayal.
Hours passed as he scoured the resources around him, discovering connections that linked him to the very life he wished to escape. But amidst the overwhelming realization of his father's legacy, something else surfaced. He recognized his own potential, the ability to navigate this murky underbelly with a mind sharp enough to outmaneuver it. Maybe he could forge another path, one that involved not just surviving, but redefining his own narrative. Still, doubt lingered. Would the consequences of pressing forward cost him more than he was prepared to pay? The choice hung like a loaded gun in a room filled with options. Each avenue he contemplated served as a reminder of what was at stake: his own life, Mia's innocence, and perhaps a chance to reclaim a legacy that had become a burden. As he stepped outside, the cool air wrapped around him, giving life to his racing thoughts. The decisions awaited him like an open road, one intersected by paths lined with hazards and history. Could he navigate it without becoming what he feared most? Fueled by the adrenaline of uncharted territory, he glanced at his phone. A new message from Matt blinked insistently, but he hesitated. Would sharing these revelations cement his role in the dark world of his father, or would it be the catalyst for change? Maybe it was time to build allegiances, but that would require a leap of faith into the depths he had yet to explore. Tomorrow bore the promise of confrontation, both with himself and the darker parts of his past he was destined to face. Could he emerge unscathed, or would he find himself shackled to the very legacy he sought to reject? As he drove home, the question echoed in his mind, a haunting whisper that wouldn't fade. When the time comes to face your father's demons, Justin, who will you be? The following morning arrived with an impenetrable fog, much like the thoughts swirling in Justin's mind. He found himself once again in front of the bathroom mirror, yet this time he didn't just see a man weighed down by legacy, but a man standing on the precipice of transformation. With each moment spent preparing for the day, he nurtured a growing sense of resolve to reclaim his narrative. His phone buzzed incessantly, yet he ignored it. The messages would have to wait. The time had come to confront the choices lingering in his mind. He couldn't ignore Matt's constant reminders of the dark ties they grew up around. The duality of their lives pinged sharply within him. One life involved the quiet humdrum of parenthood and mundane responsibilities, while the other beckoned like a siren, luring him with its thrill and danger. By the time he arrived at the cafe where he agreed to meet Matt, an undercurrent of determination propelled him forward. The morning sun stretched its golden fingers across the street, momentarily dispelling the fog and unlocking a kernel of energy in his heart.
Hidden within the routine of coffee orders and small talk were far more significant decisions. As he settled into a booth, the determination felt tangibly different compared to days prior. Matt appeared moments later, eyebrows furrowed in concern. "You okay, man? You look like you've seen a ghost." "I've seen more than a ghost," Justin replied, leaning back in his seat. "I've seen who I could be if I let this legacy consume me." "What do you mean?" Matt pressed, leaning in as if expecting a revelation. Justin's voice dropped, hardened by the weight of the truth he was grappling with. "I found out about my father's alliances, the dark connections that could drag me back into the life I thought I could escape." Matt's expression slowly morphed from confusion to understanding. "Yeah, but you can change that. You can choose to rise above it." Justin felt the hunger for change surge within him, mingled with fear. It was true, he had power over his choices, but would he choose wisely? Patting the table nervously, Justin felt a shift in their conversation's dynamic. This was less about the past and more about the future he wanted to carve for himself and Mia. "Listen," Matt leaned closer, "if you're serious about distancing yourself from your father's shadow, then you need allies who'll have your back. I'm willing to help, but you have to commit." A flicker of anxiety ran through Justin, but he nodded, appreciating the implication of unity. It was time to station himself firmly on the path of his own making, to cultivate relationships that would strengthen him, instead of anchoring him to the past. "But what if this is a mistake?" he asked. "What if I end up just like him?" "The only way you replicate what he did is by following in his footsteps. You know you don't have to do that, right?" Matt said firmly, eyes steady on his. "You're not him." Each word resonated deeply, leading Justin to confront the truth tucked away in his heart. The identity he carried wasn't an unbreakable chain. It was merely a choice, a flicker of hope waiting to be ignited. But he would need to uncover the same charisma his father wielded, just without the veins of corruption. "Let's make a plan," Justin finally decided, his tone resolute. "Information is one thing, but I need to carve out alliances that will work in my favor."
They spent the next hours mapping their next steps, gathering intel on rival factions, understanding the dynamics of loyalties, and preemptively navigating the pitfalls that awaited him. Each detail filled Justin with newfound vigor. For the first time in years, he could envision a life not defined by the shadows of a father's legacy, but by his aspirations. As they wrapped up, Matt clapped him on the shoulder, a gesture of reassurance and camaraderie. "You've got this, man. Just remember, you're not the only one fighting to rewrite the script. Lean on me when things get tough."
Gratitude bubbled inside as Justin stepped outside into the bustling street. The sun warmed his face, a sign of things ready to come, a life of choices, alliances, and perhaps redemption. Yet an unforeseen risk loomed on his horizon, one that could potentially erase the hard-fought progress he was starting to make. Just as he prepared to stride forward, his phone buzzed again, this time demanding attention. Without hesitation, he opened it, his heart racing at the sight of a message from an unknown number. "Let's talk. I know what you're planning, and you'll need to answer to me." The chill that ran down his spine was sharp and cold. In that moment, Justin realized the stakes of his transformation were far greater than he ever anticipated. The question loomed larger than before. Would he be strong enough to face what lay ahead, or would he falter and find himself back in a world he fought so hard to escape? Justin stood frozen in place, the weight of the message hanging in midair like a tangible threat. Each word on the screen echoed in his mind, clawing at the edge of his resolve. The chill spread from his fingertips to his core, a stark reminder that freedom came at a cost, one he hadn't fully considered until now. He took a breath, forcing his mind to gain clarity. In a world where shadows loomed larger than life, it was paramount to stay a step ahead. What did this unknown number know? Who was drawing the lines of fate he now sought to redefine? The questions ignited a fierce drive. He could not allow fear to dictate the trajectory of his life. He marched forward, purpose filtering through the uncertainty. Mia's laughter played in his head like a sweet anthem, a reminder of everything worth fighting for. He pulled up the contact list, his fingers hovering over the screen to reach out to Matt. They had conspired together, crafted a plan that could liberate him from his father's toxic grasp. But now they needed to adapt, pivoting quickly in the face of an unpredictable adversary. "Let me get to the bottom of this," he murmured to himself, determination blossoming as he set off toward the nearest public library. It was a sanctuary of information. He needed to tap into every available resource, find out who was behind the message, and prepare for the fight that awaited him. Hours passed as Justin immersed himself in stacks of documents, articles, and myriad databases. With each piece of information he unearthed, his confidence swelled. He was no longer a passive observer of his fate. He was actively sculpting his identity, piecing together the building blocks of a future that resonated with authenticity. As the sun dipped low on the horizon, the library lights flickered to life, casting an ethereal glow across the room. The cacophony of turning pages and soft typing was a rhythm that anchored him during the hours of solitary research.
Suddenly, an article caught his eye, not one directly related to his father's dealings, but something more personal. It delved into the psychological impacts of familial legacies, offering insight into how inherited identities can bind or empower individuals. The author elaborated on the importance of defining one's own path through intentional choices, an echo of the conversation he had shared with Matt. Justin couldn't help but ponder his life decisions as he scribbled notes in the margins. He'd spent so long living in the shadow of his father, allowing that lineage to suffocate his aspirations. The article breathed new life into his convictions. If he could dismantle the chains woven through his past, he could craft something decidedly powerful, something that stood as a beacon for Mia. As he pieced together theories and insights, another buzz disrupted his concentration. He glanced down at his phone, heart racing again. This time it wasn't an anonymous threat, but a message from Matt. "Where are you? You went dark. We need to regroup. There's a storm coming." The urgency in Matt's words felt electric, like a call to arms he couldn't ignore. Justin considered the implications. The unknown lurking in the shadows could ultimately lead to a confrontation with the demons he had tried to flee, but he couldn't turn back now. That would only return him to the haunting cycle that plagued his family for generations. He replied swiftly, arranging to meet at their usual spot. Gathering his materials, he left the library feeling invigorated. The fear that initially gripped him was now morphing into adrenaline. Each step taken was a radical choice, asserting his position in a life deeply entwined with uncertainty. As he reached the cafe where he'd meet Matt, a sense of anticipation filled the air. The stakes were rising, and so was his resolve. When they locked eyes, Justin could see the urgency mirrored in Matt's expression. "Did you get any leads?" Matt asked, a tinge of worry laced in his tone. "The message, it's a threat, but it's also a catalyst. We need to prepare for a confrontation with whoever's been watching us," Justin said, steeling himself. "Then let's get to work. The time has come to face whoever's behind this if we want to change things for good," Matt replied, his voice brimming with conviction. As they dove into planning their next steps, Justin's heart thudded with a mix of excitement and trepidation. He could feel his father's shadow looming, but for the first time he acknowledged the flickers of light that began to break through. The battle for his own identity was just beginning, and he was resolute. This time he wouldn't just run, he would stand his ground. But just then, another sound pierced through their determination. A loud crash echoed from the street outside, followed by frantic voices. Instinct kicked in, and the chilling reality settled. Danger was closer than either of them had anticipated, ready to confront them head-on.
The cafe door swung open with a bang, sending a ripple of startled conversations through the room. Justin's heart skipped a beat as he turned to face the disturbance. Two men burst through the door, their expressions tight with urgency. They locked eyes on him, as if recognizing the embodiment of their long-anticipated confrontation. Justin's pulse quickened, adrenaline coursing through him like liquid fire. He exchanged a brief glance with Matt, who was equally alert, ready to jump into action. "Stay close," he murmured, narrowing his focus on the men advancing toward them. "Justin," one of the intruders, a tall man with slicked-back hair and an unyielding glare, announced loudly over the cafe's ambient noise. "It's time to talk." "Sure, let's talk," Justin replied, his voice steadier than he felt. He gestured towards a corner booth, instinctively drawing Matt along with him. They settled into the secluded spot, and the two men followed, blocking any chance of easy escape. "You know who we are," the second man said, leaning forward, his presence pressing against Justin's resolve. "We are here to remind you that your blood doesn't lie. You need to understand the stakes behind your decisions." "Is that a threat?" Justin said, forcing confidence into his tone. "Because if it is, let's cut to the chase. I'm not interested in the past. I'm building a future for my daughter, one that doesn't involve you or your associates." The first man sneered, and for a moment Justin could see the doubt flicker in his eyes. "You think you can just cut ties and walk away? You made your choices, and now they come with consequences." "Justin's here to make his own choices," Matt interjected, defending his friend's position. His loyalty pulsed between them like a protective aura. The two men exchanged glances, and Justin seized the opportunity. "What do you want? If you're just here to threaten me, you're wasting your time. I've already committed to breaking free from this legacy." "Then it's the perfect time for a test," the second man retorted, a cruel glimmer in his eyes. With a nod, he gestured to the door. "Let's make this a little more interesting." Before Justin could react, the men sprang into action, flanking him and Matt, forcing them out onto the street. His heart raced, but amidst the tension, clarity washed over him. This was the confrontation he had been preparing for, an explosive catalyst propelling him toward the resolution he desperately needed. "Let's talk here," the slicked-haired man said, motioning to the gathering crowd beyond the cafe. "You want to protect your family. There's a simple way to prove that." "What do you mean?" Justin's voice was firm, but he could feel the faint tremor of fear threading through his resolve. "Participate in an exchange," the second man announced, brandishing a small duffel bag. The crowd parted as they observed with palpable intrigue. They were watching a moment that could alter the course of Justin's life dramatically. "Do this, and we'll leave you and your daughter alone. Fail, and you'll face consequences you might not survive." Justin's mind raced. Every instinct urged him to reject the proposition. He was not willing to play the pawn in this twisted game. "No, I'm not a player in your world." The first man moved closer, his voice lowering. "This isn't about choices anymore. It's about survival. You want out? Prove you're willing to do what's necessary. Trust us, playing pacifist won't protect your girl." For a moment, Justin's world narrowed down to the implications of their words. His thoughts snapped to Mia, the reason he had fought to unearth and dismantle the shadows of his legacy. Could this be a test of loyalty to her? Or had he simply fallen into the same trap that ensnared his father, an insidious pull towards darkness in the name of survival? "Listen, whatever you think about me, I'm not my father," Justin said, desperation seeping into his voice. "I won't repeat his mistakes." Silence hung in the air,
thick with tension. The men clearly perceived something powerful rising within him, determination forged in the fires of fatherhood, and an unwavering desire for change. In that moment, as the shadows loomed closer, Justin realized he held a potent power, the ability to redirect this encounter. "You want proof? I'll give you proof," he declared, surprising even himself with the fierceness of his conviction. "I'll make decisions in my life, on my own terms." The men exchanged wary glances, uncertainty creeping in. "What are you saying?" the slick-haired man asked, his composure faltering, if only for a heartbeat. "I'll gather intel on what you're doing, not to protect myself from you, but to dismantle what this city has been living under. I'll expose the criminal lunacy my father subscribed to. I'll cut those ties without your help. If that doesn't work for you, then we have no further business." A beat of silence settled in between them, the stakes redefined. Justin took a step back, vulnerability mingling with strength. He was standing against his family's dark legacy, declaring his own evolution for the first time. "You really think you can outsmart us?" the second man challenged, but there was a hint of doubt in his voice that set off a flicker of hope within Justin. "I'm done watching from the sidelines. You can either give me a chance, or we part ways now." Each word fell into place, each statement tying him more deeply to the path he chose for Mia's future. The initial bravado of the men dulled, their smirks faltering, as Justin's steady gaze met theirs, unwavering in its determination. Whether or not they accepted his proposal, he had crossed into new territory, a choice that defined him not only as a son, but as a father. "What's it going to be?"
He pressed again, letting the weight of his challenge hang in the air. An uneasy alliance clung to the murmur of the crowd, uncertainty rippling through those who had witnessed the escalation. Suddenly, the first man raised a brow, a glimmer of admiration sparking in his expression. "We'll see how this plays out," he conceded, stepping back slightly. "But remember, the moment you think you're free from this life, it will draw you back in. Consider this your warning, Justin." As the men retreated, reality crashed in. Justin felt the familiar tremor of anxiety, but nestled beneath it was a trepidation-tinged empowerment. No longer was he running from his past, he was standing tall, claiming the life he desired for Mia. Amidst the lingering crowd, Justin turned to Matt, who wore an expression of approval and concern. "That was bold," Matt admitted. "But it's only just begun, hasn't it?" "Yes," Justin replied, a newfound confidence tangling with the weight of what lay ahead. "And now, I'm ready to face it all head-on." He felt the somber shadows still flickering within and around him, reminding him that transformation came with trials. Yet, he held on to the flicker of hope ignited in that moment. He had chosen to carve a narrative distinct from his father's legacy. No longer defined by fear, Justin resolved to craft a life that embodied protection, transparency, and strength for Mia. This was only the beginning of forging his path, a path committed not to the shadows he had inherited, but to the promise of light he was creating for his family. As he stepped forward, he was imbued with certainty. He would emerge from this battle with a deeper understanding and a future worth fighting for. Destiny awaited, and with determination fueling his steps, Justin began to reclaim the pieces of his heritage on his own terms.